enjoy the content, please consider subscribing. All bit of support is appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Wonka number 3. Okay, before we get to today's movie, I need to go over the significance of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The first movie is one of my all-time favorite movies. Yep, pressure off the bat. At least I could only limit Into the Spider-Verse as one of my all-time favorite animated movies. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is like a top 10, maybe top 5 for me. It's insane how good this movie is. It's almost a perfect film. The more insane thing is that it's been as classic and timeless as it is. The fact we've only had 3 adaptations of this specific character and story is quite interesting. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory on the other hand, yeah, quick summary of my thoughts. I thought this was a lame movie from the get-go. Not bad, but it's not... You know how people love the original Dumbo and then Tim Burton Burtoned all over the film? That's how Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is to me, right down to Tim Burton being on it. I want to assure everyone, I don't hate Tim Burton. The guy has a style and it works, good for him. But man, that style sure gets old quick, and that old style over substance thing sure gets repetitive quick. His worst movies often feel like Tim Burton movies, while his best movies transport you to a world of wonder. This one is something in between. It's not quite his worst, but to call it his best is also not saying much. I don't know, it was kind of just all over the place, and I didn't feel like it was Willy Wonka. So how does the 2023 movie go about? Well, it's different. It's not quite the original for me, but again, the original is one of my favorite all-time movies, yet it is better than the Tim Burton movie. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get to the... You lose! Years ago, there was a young man named Willy Wonka, a magician, showman, and above all else, chocolate maker, and well, good one at that. He believes his chocolate can change the world, as he once told his mother that he would do. Well, it turns out the world is a lot less forgiving, and Wonka quickly finds himself at the bottom, with some new friends such as Noodle, a young girl with a troubled past, and a whole slew of characters all driven by one thing, the need to get out. Throughout Wonka's journey, he learns of his competition Slugworth, who is an insanely dastardly and greedy man, an Oompa Loompa, which we all know where that went, and he learns that sometimes the big dream can change depending on the people you meet. Will Wonka get his chocolate factory dream and change the world? Have you seen the movie? You lose! Okay, before I get to the not just good stuff, but really good stuff, I have my problems with this movie. The biggest problem overall is the story is very safe, for the most part. There's a few good things I'll talk about in the pro section. But I should mention, before you go see this movie, it was directed by Paul King, the guy who did both Paddington movies, which is not a bad thing. Those are some solid family movies. So this movie does take those risks. When it does, well, we'll get to that. I also argue this soundtrack is very, how do I put it lightly, Lyle Crocodile. Nothing in this soundtrack sticks with you. It's good head-bopping music. Nothing especially amazing, but it's still catchy tunes you'll hum to yourself. That is with one exception. For me and Slugworth, a guy so bastardly and cynical, his sidekicks sure are one note. One makes subtle messages obvious, which got me a few times, but it's still very meh. And the other guy, I don't even know, he barely had lines compared to Slugworth and the bald dude. Other than Noodle and Abacus, none of the other servants as they're referred to, and I won't go into spoilers, but none of them are especially interesting characters. There's 2 of them I remember speaking once, and all of a sudden, they're main characters out of nowhere. The humor does balance between being very safe kiddie humor to some genuine laughs, which I'll get to. Timothée Chalamet is one of those actors who really hits the mark or he doesn't. And I'll say what he hits almost the mark. I like that Gene Wilder was more laid back with his performance. Everything that happened was just kind of according to plan. He never really was whimsical or showy about his achievements. Chalamet talks like this was how the character was supposed to be, bouncy, a showman, and it doesn't work for me. I'm sure it worked for others, but I prefer that he harnessed some of Wilder's performance and learned how to be laid back and not necessarily over the top and whimsical. In some ways, I'm glad he did his own spin, but it would have worked better, in my opinion, to add that sarcasm and cynical edge to a movie that's already played it pretty safe. Okay, to probably my second biggest problem with this movie, Hugh Grant as the Oompa Loompa. I'm sorry, I don't get this casting choice, I don't get the amount of screen time he gets, I especially don't get the CG on him. It's not MODOK bad, but it's She-Hulk bad. It's just creepy enough, and it doesn't help that this Oompa Loompa talks. A lot. And yeah, sure, he's played by Hugh Grant. His voice demands that he has some good lines, and he does. But there's a whole charm to the Oompa Loompas in the original, how they talk so little yet showed so much. This guy talks so much and shows so little, if that makes sense. And I'm not saying that just because he's an Oompa Loompa, alright? It can get cheesy, but let me explain. I do really like this movie, and honestly, out of all the movies I'd watched this year, you'll be surprised it landed in the top 20. I know, it's crazy, but let's just talk about... You lose! This movie is very emotional. That's always been kind of a thing for the Paddington movies, how they always are able to provoke tears, even with being so simple. There's a scene where Wonka talks about how he wants his deceased mom, to be there when his chocolate changes the world. And I won't give away what happens, but it's so simple yet it works so well. I think about Paddington is that it always knew how to make a joke work. Like there's this comedian guy who works with Wonka and he makes a joke about how he learned how to speak as if he's underwater. It's kind of a lame joke that no one laughed at in the theater, but I knew how Paul Keene worked. That joke was going to make another appearance. And let's just say, it's not an amazing workaround, but it does work. I bitched about Chalamet as Wonka, but even then, he's not awful. He actually really is one of my favorite newer actors. The set designs are freaking gorgeous. I like that this movie is different from Willy Wonka and Charlie's look. Like, if you showed me the city set from this movie and the city set from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I could tell them apart. Slugworth is a highlight. He's played by Patterson Joseph, who, if you've seen really anything he's in, you know he's good at that snooty personality, which captures Slugworth perfectly. Keegan-Michael Key plays the chief of police, and I'm glad this movie didn't pull a Playing with Fire, which had him in every scene. He's a funny dude, but he needs to be spaced out and spread around the movie, and that's what they do, with easily one of the funniest running jokes in the movie. Olivia Colman plays Mr. Scrubbit, a woman who has dastardly as Slugsworth, and she's an absolute riot. They play her the same way they played Trunchbull in Matilda, wide-angle close-ups with big emphasis on gross features like teeth, and I loved it. It's nice to see Coleman, who usually is quite reserved with most of her roles, completely played as this big British joke, and it's nice to see that she has that sense of humor. The movie sure makes the chocolate look good, which I guess is a good thing considering the movie's title. Okay, so of all the things this movie does, it does one thing better than the original. I said I'd talk about it. What is it? This movie's pure imagination scene and score are so much better than the original. Not to dog on the original scene, but it was really simple, which for the late 90s, you aren't expected to go the extra mile, but this scene made me and an old guy in the back of the theater cry like babies. It was insane how they did this. I remember one lady asking me, "You good?" after the scene had passed, and I just had to go about my day saying, I'm okay. It's insane how good this scene was done, and for all the other things this movie plays safe, it needed to do this scene the way it was done.
Good day, sir!
Wonka is just a delight. If you're basing it off the original, you won't find much better than the first, but for the few things it does do right, I absolutely can't recommend it enough. It might play it a bit safe, but it's a savory treat worth the price of admission.